America's grocery aisles have become the recession trigger no one is talking about. Beneath the bright store lighting and cheerful sale signs, a silent catastrophe is unfolding. Over 40 million Americans are now struggling to afford basic food, the largest hunger crisis since the Great Recession. Inflation shattered affordability, stagnant wages crushed families, and millions were pushed into impossible choices they were never prepared to make. Now grocery carts are emptying nationwide. When families can't eat, they can't work. And when workers disappear, the economy follows. This is how a food crisis becomes America's next economic collapse. America's grocery affordability didn't collapse overnight. It was engineered one price increase at a time. For decades, the standard grocery budget consumed 10 to 12% of household income, reflecting what families could reasonably manage. But as food prices surged past 30% inflation since 2020, while wages remained frozen at $12 to $18 per hour in most states, the entire system quietly shifted. Prices climbed to levels not to reflect actual costs, but to protect corporate profit margins in a market where consumer purchasing power had evaporated. This inflation-driven pricing model has now become the destroyer of American household budgets. Nearly one-third of all families now spend 20 to 25% of their income on groceries alone, with millions of households locked into a financial structure that outlives their ability to sustain it. A paycheck designed to cover a month of expenses is now consumed in 2 weeks, leaving families trapped in debt spirals long after the food is eaten. And because real wages haven't grown since the 1970s, while grocery inflation accelerated from 2% to 8% annually, the total cost of survival quietly exploded. A family spending $600 per month on groceries in 2019 now needs $850 to buy the same items. That's $3,000 more per year extracted directly from paychecks that never increased. The most alarming consequence is how this structure disconnects grocery prices from true affordability. Stores display sale prices to create the illusion of savings. A shopper sees chicken at $5.99 per pound and thinks it's reasonable, never noticing that same chicken cost $3.49 just 4 years ago. This psychological trap, the discount pricing model, allowed grocery chains to continue extracting profits even as living costs destroyed household budgets. But discounting prices doesn't increase incomes. The deficit still accumulates. The bills still compound. And families still run out of money far faster than the month runs out. By week 3 of a 4-week pay cycle, millions of households discover they have no money left for food, making meal planning impossible and nutrition pointless. This is the structural fracture now destabilizing the entire consumer economy. When families living paycheck to paycheck can't afford to eat, defaults become inevitable. Price inflation didn't save the grocery industry. It delayed the recognition of a collapsing middle class. And now the very mechanism invented to hide poverty is triggering a cascade of economic failures across America. Number 10. Alabama, the malnutrition accelerator. How does a state with one of the nation's lowest median incomes survive a grocery crisis that has transformed food from a basic necessity into a financial weapon? The immediate human cost is visible in the explosion of diet-related disease. Alabama already suffers from some of the nation's highest rates of diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. When healthy food costs 40% more than processed alternatives, families aren't choosing junk food. They're being forced into it by economic violence. This isn't preference, it's survival. And it creates a devastating feedback loop. The food people can actually afford is actively poisoning them, while the nutrition required to stay healthy is financially impossible to reach. The underlying catastrophe is heartbreakingly simple. Wages cannot keep pace with prices. The median household income sits at $62,000, but for the majority, wages have remained locked at $11 to $15 per hour for over a decade. Meanwhile, grocery prices detonated. A 30% surge since 2020 has turned routine shopping into an anxiety-filled ritual of sacrifice and math. Over 40% of Alabama households now report struggling to afford basic necessities, one of the highest financial collapse rates in the nation. This devastation appears most brutally in the supermarket. A family budgeting $120 per week for food in 2020 now needs $180 to $200, and they're getting significantly less volume. Meat has been reclassified as a luxury item, reserved for special occasions, not weekly dinners. Fresh fruit is being replaced with sugar-filled canned substitutes. Parents are skipping protein portions entirely so their children can eat more. In rural Alabama, the crisis intensifies into something far more sinister. Entire counties depend on one or two grocery stores serving hundreds of square miles. Many towns have functionally become food deserts. Residents drive 30 to 40 miles just to reach a supermarket. With gas at $3.20 to $3.50 per gallon, the trip itself becomes a financial burden. Families living on the edge cannot afford fuel for multiple shopping trips, so they buy less, ration more, and stretch meals beyond safe limits just to reach the next paycheck. The final pressure point is community resources collapsing under demand. Food banks are overwhelmed, reporting 50% to 70% increases compared to pre-pandemic levels. Volunteers describe a shocking transformation in who's standing in line. Nurses, retail workers, warehouse employees, single parents working full-time, people doing everything society told them to do, yet still unable to feed themselves. The shame keeps many silent, and that silence turns directly into hunger. Behind every half-empty shopping cart is a family falling further behind, trapped in an economy that punished them for being born in the wrong income bracket. Number 9. Arkansas, America's hunger capital. Why does nearly 1 in 5 families struggle to afford food in a state where the cost of living is supposed to be low? For households on the edge, every extra dollar spent on groceries is stolen from rent, electricity, or transportation. The entire financial structure teeters. This is the brutal reality of a structural collapse that has been accelerating in Arkansas for years, and it's now reaching critical mass. Arkansas holds a title no state wants, the highest food insecurity rate in America. Nearly 19% of households struggle to afford adequate food. That's 1 out of every 5 families. This isn't a temporary spike. It's evidence of how fragile survival has become for millions. Average household income hovers around $54,000, well below the national median, while grocery prices exploded 30% or more since 2020. This gap between frozen wages and surging costs is wide enough to push entire communities into starvation. The crisis deepens because affordable grocery options are vanishing. Massive sections of Arkansas are now classified as food deserts, where residents must travel extreme distances just to buy real food. A standard week of groceries now costs $150 to $190. Items like meat, eggs, and produce have been downgraded from routine staples to occasional luxuries. Parents enter stores praying their budget holds, only to leave in shock when $80 barely covers essentials. Rural areas suffer the most extreme pressure. Families travel 25 to 40 miles to reach a supermarket, burning $10 to $15 in gas per trip. That makes grocery shopping itself financially punitive. Others rely on corner stores with inflated prices and zero healthy options. Nutritious food becomes impossible. Processed food fills the void. Health deteriorates, medical bills increase, the cycle of poverty deepens. Food banks across Arkansas are operating in crisis mode. Demand has skyrocketed 50% to 70% in some regions. The Arkansas Food Bank and Northwest Arkansas Food Bank report record-breaking lines filled with teachers, construction workers, caregivers, warehouse staff, hard-working people who end each week uncertain how they'll eat. Arkansas exposes a brutal truth. Even in low cost of living states, you're one grocery trip away from financial collapse. Food is non-negotiable. But for millions in Arkansas, it's becoming unpredictable, unaffordable, and increasingly out of reach. Number 8. California, the billionaire famine. How can a state with the 5th largest economy on Earth have millions of residents lined up for emergency food? The most painful outcome is visible at food banks, reporting 60% to 80% increases in demand. Food distribution centers in Los Angeles County alone now serve 900,000 people monthly. That's a number you'd expect after a natural disaster, not in a region overflowing with billion-dollar tech companies and global wealth. The cause is mathematical brutality. For the average renter, monthly housing exceeds $2,750. Gas sits above $5 per gallon in major metros. When rent, transportation, and utilities consume the entire paycheck, groceries become the sacrifice point, the necessity that gets cut. Behind the surface glamour of Silicon Valley and Hollywood, millions are going hungry. California has one of the highest real poverty rates in America. Roughly 18% of the population, over 7 million people, are struggling to survive. Nowhere is that struggle more immediate than at checkout. In the Bay Area or Los Angeles, a basic week of groceries costs $150 to $200 before buying anything special. A gallon of milk that cost $3 is now $5.49. Eggs that were $1.50 are now $4 or more. Chicken, produce, and vegetables have jumped 25% to 40% in 4 years. This crisis has escaped low-income boundaries. Middle-class Californians are collapsing into food hardship. Teachers, delivery drivers, medical assistants, office workers, people who followed every rule society gave them. They got jobs, worked hard, and still can't afford a full grocery cart. Parents with full-time jobs wait in line before sunrise for produce. Seniors choose between medications and meals. College students skip dinner 3 to 4 nights weekly to cover tuition and rent. When paychecks barely cover basics, the grocery aisle becomes a war zone of impossible choices. Shoppers abandon meat, switch to generic brands, stretch every ingredient to maximize meals. They tell themselves it's temporary, even as nothing improves. California is the warning for America, a state with overflowing tax revenue, massive wealth, and booming industries still can't ensure citizens can afford food. If hunger exists here at this scale, what does that say about everywhere else? Number 7. Louisiana, the silent humanitarian crisis. In a state accustomed to surviving catastrophic hurricanes, why is the quiet struggle for groceries proving more destructive? The most difficult truth: most people suffering are doing nothing wrong. They're employed. They budget. They sacrifice. Yet the grocery store feels like a battlefield where they defend every dollar. This is a silent, slow-moving humanitarian emergency that never makes headlines, but is felt in every pantry, every checkout line, every family desperately stretching meals from nothing. Louisiana's fragile job market compounds the devastation. Many industries pay $10 to $14 per hour, nowhere near enough to match the price surge. A family earning $45,000 annually drowns under rent, utilities, and medical bills, leaving groceries to consume nearly half their paycheck. Louisiana struggles with immense poverty. Roughly 19% live below the poverty line. Add 30% to 40% grocery inflation since 2020, and the result is a state where millions fight daily just to keep food on the table. In New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport, prices have reached crisis levels. A standard grocery trip costs $170 to $220. Even buying only generics and skipping all luxuries. Fresh produce is painfully expensive. Meat prices have doubled in some categories. Families stretch food beyond safe limits. Children eat smaller portions. Parents skip meals entirely to ensure enough remains. Outside cities, the crisis becomes catastrophic. Rural Louisiana is one of the hardest hit regions in America. Many parishes are food deserts. Residents travel 20 to 50 miles to find real grocery stores. With gas at 320 to 360, every trip requires financial calculation. People buy cheaper, shelf-stable processed food, knowing it's unhealthy but more realistic given budget constraints. Food banks operate at emergency levels year-round. The Greater Baton Rouge Food Bank serves tens of thousands more families monthly compared to pre-pandemic, with demand doubled in some areas. Volunteers describe cars lining up hours before distribution. Seniors, full-time workers, single parents, young couples, all needing help just to survive another week. Number 6. Texas, the hunger giant. How can a state defined by booming wealth hold the tragic distinction of having the largest number of hungry people in America? What makes Texas especially heartbreaking is the immense contradiction. This state has flourishing industries and overflowing wealth, yet millions can't afford groceries. Billion-dollar corporations expand headquarters downtown, while families in suburbs quietly skip meals to survive. Texas isn't experiencing a grocery crisis. It's living through a silent humanitarian emergency in plain sight that almost nobody discusses. Texas carries a crisis bigger than most realize. It has the largest food-insecure population in the United States. Roughly 17.6% of Texans, over 5.3 million people, struggle to afford enough food. No other state approaches Texas in sheer hunger volume, and it keeps growing. While Texas boasts strong employment numbers on paper, financial reality is brutal. Wages haven't matched exploding costs. Rents in Dallas, Austin, and Houston jumped 25% to 40% in recent years. Groceries climbed nearly 30% since 2020. Gas runs $3.20 to $3.70 per gallon, adding crushing burden. Paychecks vanish before families complete weekly shopping. A typical grocery run for a family of 4 costs $160 to $200. That's devastating in a state where millions earn $12 to $18 hourly. For many, survival means severely cutting protein, skipping fresh produce entirely, relying on cheaper processed foods. The grocery store has become a place where every choice carries guilt, shame, and impossible math. Food banks are stretched beyond capacity. The Houston Food Bank serves over 1 million people monthly. In North Texas, demand surged 40% compared to pre-pandemic. Volunteers describe parking lots filling hours before distribution. These lines aren't just low-income families anymore. Middle-class workers are joining. Teachers, medical assistants, retail staff, delivery drivers, people with real jobs who still can't afford to eat. Rural Texas adds another devastating layer. Entire counties lack full-service grocery stores. Residents drive 40 to 60 miles round trip for basic staples. That journey drains $15 to $20 in fuel. Expense-struggling families cannot spare. Number 5, Nevada. The buffet workers starving in paradise. How can a state built on excess and luxury fail to feed the people who power its economy? Nevada's economic contradiction is now fully exposed. A state built entirely on spectacle is failing to ensure its workforce can afford to eat. Tourists load plates at extravagant buffets while cooks, housekeepers, and staff preparing those meals go home and skip dinner. This is a quiet emergency unfolding under neon lights, inside overcrowded apartments, in supermarket aisles where every price tag feels less like an offer and more like a threat. Financial pressure is unrelenting. Over 44% of Nevada households struggle to cover basic expenses, one of the highest hardship rates in the country. This state runs on tourism, gig work, and service jobs. Most workers earn $13 to $18 hourly. That income evaporates when faced with 2025 costs. Even families reporting $50,000 to $55,000 annually are rapidly falling behind. Housing costs make it worse. In Las Vegas and Reno, rent exploded over 30% in recent years. Families face an impossible choice: maintain a roof overhead or buy enough groceries for the week. Groceries consume overwhelming portions of paychecks. A weekly shopping trip for a family of 4 hits $180 to $200. Meat, dairy, and fresh produce have been reclassified as luxuries. Families carefully plan when they can afford fruit. Nothing about food is casual anymore. This happens because reality is darker than the Las Vegas Strip suggests. Behind luxury resorts sits one of America's worst cost of living crises. Since 2020, grocery prices jumped over 25% while wages stagnated. Food banks are overwhelmed beyond pandemic levels. Centers in Clark County serve tens of thousands weekly. And the people seeking help are the state's economic backbone: hotel workers, casino staff, airport employees, security guards, retail workers, rideshare drivers, full-time employees who admit they can't provide 3 meals daily. Number 4, West Virginia, mountains that hide hunger. West Virginia is where communities stick together, where families know each other by name, where mountains rise like ancient protectors. But those same mountains now hide a worsening crisis that reveals itself most clearly at the grocery store. West Virginia has fought poverty for generations, but what's happening now cuts deeper, with median incomes around $55,000 and food prices surging 25% to 35% since 2020. Even basic groceries feel impossible for thousands of families. In many counties, the nearest full-service store is a brutal drive: 20 miles, 30 miles, sometimes 40 miles. Gas at $3.30 to $3.70 per gallon transforms every shopping trip into added expense families can't ignore. That extra $10 for fuel means buying fewer vegetables, skipping meat entirely, trading fresh produce for cheaper canned goods. Rural life used to mean peace and simplicity. Now it's a barrier to survival. West Virginia ranks among the worst states for households struggling with basic expenses. Nearly 45% of adults report difficulty paying for rent, utilities, and especially groceries. In towns hollowed out by factory closures and vanishing jobs, paychecks evaporate before carts are full. A week of groceries for a small family easily reaches $150 to $180. That's devastating where many earn $12 to $15 hourly. Food banks, once supplemental help for the poorest, have become lifelines for working households. In southern coalfield regions, demand has skyrocketed. Volunteers describe parking lots filling before sunrise, cars stretching down roads, parents waiting patiently for small boxes of staples: rice, pasta, beans, peanut butter. It's not enough to solve the problem, but it's survival. West Virginia's grocery crisis was shaped by slow-moving forces building for decades: economic decline, low wages, rural isolation. But the impact is immediate and devastating. Families buy cheaper food because they literally can't afford better. Seniors skip meals to stretch Social Security. Parents choose hunger so kids don't feel that pain. The mountains have always made West Virginia feel isolated. But today, that isolation shows differently: in empty pantries, in rationed meals, in grocery aisles that feel heavier with each passing year. Number 3, Mississippi, the front line of American hunger. Mississippi has always been labeled one of America's poorest states. But what's happening now goes beyond stereotypes. This is the front line of the nation's grocery crisis. With one of the highest poverty rates in the country and the highest share of income spent on food, Mississippi families are being crushed. Even though groceries cost less here than many states, incomes are so low it makes no difference. Typical households earn around $52,000 yearly, one of the nation's lowest. After 30% to 40% food inflation, families now spend 20% to 25% of income on groceries. That's double the national average. A week of food for a family of 4 easily reaches $150 to $180 before adding rent, utilities, gas, medical bills. Food insecurity is among America's worst. In some counties, nearly 1 in 4 households struggles to afford adequate food. Food banks like the Mississippi Food Network report demand so high lines wrap around buildings. Volunteers see families arriving in cars running on fumes. spending their last drops of gas to get help. In rural Mississippi, the crisis becomes nearly impossible. Entire communities rely on a single grocery store, or worse, a convenience store with higher prices and no fresh food. Many drive 20 to 30 miles for basics, adding $10 to $15 in gas to bills they can't pay. So families ration everything. Parents water down milk. Seniors skip meals so Social Security stretches. Kids learn to hide hunger because the fridge is half empty. These aren't rare stories. They're everyday life for hundreds of thousands. Mississippi isn't just struggling. It's the warning sign for America, a place where wages collapsed long before prices skyrocketed. It shows exactly what happens when an entire state is abandoned and then forced to fight for food in the richest nation on earth. Number 2. New Mexico. Beautiful landscapes, brutal hunger. New Mexico is one of America's most beautiful states. Wide open skies, stunning desert landscapes, rich culture spanning generations. But for people living here daily, life has become a battle outsiders rarely understand. Food insecurity has reached levels matching the nation's poorest regions. Nearly 1 out of every 5 households struggles to afford groceries. That's one of the highest rates in the entire country. The root is painfully simple. Wages remain among the nation's lowest. Many workers earn $12 to $16 hourly. Meanwhile, food costs surged 25% to 35% since 2020. A grocery cart that costs $70 now hits $110. Fresh produce, meat, and dairy have become the most painful purchases, especially in rural areas where stores are limited and prices run higher because transportation costs get added to everything. New Mexico suffers from one of America's worst child hunger rates. In many school districts, over 70% of kids depend on free or reduced price meals. For these children, the school cafeteria is their most reliable food source. When school closes, even just for weekends, parents scramble desperately to fill the gap. Food pantries report sharp increases in families seeking emergency groceries just to bridge Friday to Monday. Rural communities suffer even harder. Some families drive 30 to 60 miles to reach the nearest real grocery store. Gas costs around $3.50 to $4 per gallon. That becomes an additional survival tax. When you're forced to spend $12 to $20 in fuel just to shop, you buy less food. Stretch meals further than safe. Ration portions. Tell yourself it's temporary. New Mexico's grocery crisis isn't loud or dramatic. It doesn't make headlines. It's slow and quiet. It's the mother skipping dinner so kids have enough. The elderly man choosing canned soup over fresh food because it lasts longer. Parents working every day who feel like they're sinking deeper financially each week. Food in New Mexico has stopped being a choice. It's become a painful calculation, a constant reminder that surviving isn't the same as living. Number 1. Oklahoma, the silent disaster. Oklahoma has survived tornadoes, droughts, and hard times, but nothing feels like the quiet disaster happening now in grocery stores. Food prices are up over 30% since 2020, while wages in many towns remain stuck at $13 to $17 hourly. That math doesn't work, and families feel it every time they walk into Walmart or the local Homeland. More than 43% of Oklahoma households struggle to cover basic expenses, one of the highest rates in the country. Food insecurity is hitting recession-level highs, even as economists insist the economy looks strong. A week of groceries for a family of 4 now runs $160 to $200, even with store brands. Ground beef that was $3.49 per pound is now $5.99. A simple bag of apples can cost $8. Families aren't cutting back, they're cutting meals. Rural Oklahoma is hit hardest. Many counties rely on one grocery store for miles, with prices 10% to 20% higher than cities. Add $3.10 to $3.40 gas, and every food trip drains a paycheck already stretched beyond breaking. Food banks from Tulsa to Lawton are overwhelmed. Demand up 50% to 80%. Volunteers say they now see teachers, office workers, bank employees, people with jobs who still can't afford to eat. SNAP benefits haven't kept pace with inflation, pushing thousands deeper into crisis. This crisis feeds into another: health. Oklahoma already struggles with high obesity and chronic illness, and cheap junk food is now the only option many families can afford. Fresh food has become a luxury. There's no dramatic event behind this, just prices rising faster than people can earn. And in grocery aisles across the state, you can feel that pressure in every hesitant hand reaching for something they can no longer afford. The economic chain reaction. The grocery crisis spreading across America isn't some distant problem happening to other people. It's happening right now, in every state, to families who work hard, pay bills, and try to do everything right, from California to Texas, Mississippi to West Virginia. Millions face an impossible choice: pay rent or buy food, fill the gas tank or feed the kids. It's a choice no one in the richest country on earth should make. And yet, here we are. This crisis reveals something deeper. Our economic system is broken for everyday people. Wages stagnated for decades while costs exploded. People at the top keep getting richer, while people doing actual work, teachers, nurses, warehouse workers, parents, can't afford a cart of groceries. This won't fix itself. Things don't magically improve, because we hope. Real change requires awareness. It requires people understanding what's actually happening and demanding better. The grocery crisis isn't a sector-specific problem. It's a systemic collapse. When millions can't afford food, they can't afford rent. When they can't afford rent, they default on credit cards. When they default on credit, lending tightens. When lending tightens, consumer spending collapses. And when consumer spending collapses, the engine of 70% of U.S. GDP, recession becomes inevitable. America is approaching a threshold where the grocery affordability crisis is no longer a warning sign, but the defining economic risk. The combination of rising food costs, shrinking real wages, falling purchasing power, and weakened household resilience forms the precise environment that has historically preceded major downturns. The question is no longer whether families are struggling to afford food. It's whether this struggle becomes the spark that pushes the entire economy into recession. A recession triggered not by Wall Street, but by the collapse of everyday Americans' ability to afford the basic cost of survival. If this video opened your eyes to the reality millions face, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to see it. Leave a comment letting me know which state shocked you most. And subscribe. We'll keep covering the real stories mainstream media ignores. The grocery crisis is real. The hunger is real. And the people suffering deserve to be seen and heard.